Hello and welcome to this video where we will show you how to best write what might be the most important chapter of your whole bachelor's or master thesis, the methodology chapter. In the first part, we will show you the key conceptual foundations of the methodology chapter that you just need to know. In the second part, we will show you how to most efficiently find the perfect structure for your methodology chapter. In the third and most extensive part, we will present examples of well-structured methodology chapters which you can similarly apply in your bachelor's or master thesis. Note that you can download all role model papers used in this video right below it. The methodology chapter is the heart of any scientific piece of work, including your bachelor or master thesis. Why? Because this is where you actually explain how you conducted your research. Note that the what, meaning what you find out in your thesis at the end, is actually not really relevant, because unlike a professor, you are not under pressure to produce something so interesting that it can be published in a top journal. No, you have the luxury of being completely open-ended with a topic that interests you, regardless of how likely it is that you will discover something surprising or groundbreaking. However, the how, meaning how you specifically arrived at your results, is equally crucial no matter if you are doing a bachelor's, master's, or PhD degree. Because let's recap what really differentiates a scientific paper from a regular paper. Two things. First, a scientific paper stands out from a regular paper because it necessarily involves a systematic, purposeful approach to answer the research question at hand. Second, the results are not only presented in a comprehensible manner, but ideally are also replicable. This means two things for you. First, you must always be able to justify your methodological decisions, such as why you conducted 7 interviews instead of 10, why you choose the automotive industry over the pharmaceutical industry, or why you opted for a qualitative rather than a quantitative analysis. These justifications should also always demonstrate that your methodological choices are sensible, practical, and optimal for your research project. To ensure the replicability and comprehensibility of your results, you must document precisely and accurately what you have done in your work. To put it in other words, how you proceed in your bachelor's or master thesis is 100 times more important than the what, meaning the actual result you produce. The real purpose of the methodology chapter is therefore to clearly explain to your readers why and how you conducted your research. With this background, the methodology chapter generally has the following 3 parts. Firstly, the research context and/or sample are described. This means you explain from whom or what you have collected data and why. Secondly, it's specifically about the data collection. Here you describe how you collected the data for your analysis, and if you have taken a quantitative approach, for example, you also describe how you calculated your variables. Thirdly, it involves data analysis, meaning you describe how you analyzed and evaluated your data. For quantitative papers, this could involve regression analysis, and for qualitative works, specific coding procedures for evaluating interviews. Before we move on, here a quick note on the difference between the two concepts of methodology and method. The latter should be clear to you. A method is simply a specific procedure for collecting or analyzing data. Data collection methods include surveys, interviews, or data retrieval from a financial database like Orbis, Thomson Reuters, or Bloomberg. Data evaluation methods, on the other hand, can be semantic content analysis, statistical analysis, regression analysis, and so on. The concept of methodology, on the other hand, is somewhat more complex and describes the overarching approach of a scientific study. In short, the methodology is your overall strategy and mindset for the research project, while the method refers to the specific steps and techniques you apply to conduct your research. The concept of methodology is therefore broader and more comprehensive and also clarifies how you designed your study. Let's consider an example. Imagine you are conducting a survey on customer satisfaction in a cafe. Your methodology would be the overarching framework in which you think about the research project. For instance, whether you choose an inductive or deductive approach, what data points should be collected to yield measurable and robust results. The methodology therefore also encompasses all your assumptions about how customer satisfaction can be measured and what factors are important. The method, on the other hand, are the specific practical procedures you use for data collection and evaluation. In this case, it could be a specific survey with predefined questions. As mentioned in the previous video, you can find the ideal structure for the methodology chapter of your bachelor's or master thesis very efficiently by identifying a role model paper. To find one, just follow the following 4 steps. Firstly, visit the website vhbonline.org. Secondly, choose 2 to 3 thematic journals that fit your topic. If you're writing a paper in the field of finance, for example, the European Journal of Finance or the International Journal of Managerial Finance might be suitable. Thirdly, read the methodology chapters of articles that have used a similar methodological approach to the one you want to use in your thesis, such as regression analysis. Fourthly, apply the most suitable structure to your thesis. Please note that this has nothing to do with plagiarism. On the contrary, if you look at the series of scientific publications, you will notice that many have a very similar structure, and that's not a coincidence. Scientific papers are essentially documentations of what, why, and how research was conducted and what results that have been obtained. Regardless of whether you are writing a quantitative or qualitative paper, scientists, including your supervisor, therefore actually expect you to adhere to the established structures and methodologies used in their respective disciplines. Let's now dive into concrete examples to see how well-structured methodology chapters are composed and written. To give you a comprehensive understanding, we will look at both quantitative and qualitative study examples. If you have seen the previous videos, you will remember that the first example is a publication that investigated whether the number of suppliers has a positive or negative impact on the effects of supply chain disruptions for companies. As you can see, in the methodology chapter, the authors closely follow the ideal structure we introduced in slide 4. They start by describing the context as well as the data and sample they used. Specifically, they write in the first sentence, "We tested our hypotheses in the context of US apparel imports during the COVID-19 pandemic." After describing the study context and explaining why it is particularly suitable for answering the research question posed in the introduction, they outline the 3 steps they took to gather their data. Following the description of the research context and how they collected the data, they explain how they calculated the independent, dependent, and control variables. If you are writing a qualitative study, this part will naturally be omitted, as you will see in the next example. In the third and final part of the methodology chapter, under the section Statistical Models, they describe how and with which statistical models they analyzed the data. That was already the entire methodology chapter. Before moving on, let us highlight 2 tips from this example that you can directly apply in your thesis. First, because the authors collected quite a bit of data, they created a table providing an overview of all the variables and their corresponding data sources. This is a very helpful stylistic strategy, and we recommend it regardless of whether you have collected quantitative or qualitative data. Second, the authors use tables to describe the sample, such as the descriptive statistics and correlations between the various variables. This is something you should also do whenever possible to give readers the best possible overview of your sample. The second publication we are using as an example here is an interview-based study that investigated best practices of government organizations in natural disasters like the Hurricane Sandy. As you will see, they start the methodology chapter by describing the context in which their study was conducted, the disaster caused by Hurricane Sandy in the US in the year 2012. Furthermore, they state that they gathered data from 3 different sources. First, interviews, second, archival data, and third, fieldwork data, meaning data collected through on-site observations. They then describe the sample, which includes all the groups of people they interviewed as part of the study. As you can see, like the authors before them, they utilize tables to describe all the organizations and the numbers of interviews conducted within these organizations. They then proceed to describe precisely how they conducted the interviews and how they collected the interview data. They do exactly the same for the other 2 data sources, the archival data and the fieldwork data. Note that they consistently justify why these 3 data sources are particularly helpful in addressing their research question and repeatedly explain why they collected these data. This perfectly aligns with the purpose of the methodology chapter as we described it on slide 3 of this video. Finally, they transition into the analysis phase and under the title data analysis, and theory building describe how they specifically analyzed and evaluated the data and how they arrived at their conclusions. Before moving on to the third and final example, let us again highlight 2 tips from this example that you can directly apply in your thesis. First, they used descriptive overview tables to show readers the type of data they collected and its extent. Second, they attached a semi-structured interview guide in the online appendix so readers can see exactly what questions the authors discussed with the interviewees. The third publication we are using here as an example is an empirical study that investigated which elements are important in the use of artificial intelligence in the public sector and how these influence the processes in the public sector. We present you this example to show you how similar most papers are structured, regardless of whether they are more quantitative or qualitative, and no matter in which journal they are actually published. As you can see, the authors begin the methodology chapter with the chapter case selection, that is, they describe the sample they use and justify why it's suitable. In this section, they also add a table that immediately shows readers which 8 cases in Europe they specifically looked at in the study. In section 3.2, data collection, they then detail how they collect data on these 8 cases. And as you might guess, next in the section 3.3, data analysis, they describe how they finally evaluated and analyzed the collected data. In summary, regarding the methodology chapter, remember to document precisely what you did and why. As highlighted in slide 3, the how is more important than the what in your thesis. And because you made it until the end of this video, here an additional tip for you. Consider framing your bachelor's or master thesis as a multi-methodological research study. This might sound complex, but it simply means applying more than one method to arrive at your results. Studies that are based on a multi-methodological research approach are highly evaluated by scholars, including your supervisor, as they typically lead to more robust and well-supported findings. For instance, if you're conducting a quantitative study with regression analysis, you could supplement it by conducting 2 to 3 expert interviews to shape your study as a multi-methodological research study.